That's just kind of the nature of the game. It's hard to play well each and every week, but like I said before, when it feels really good, it's not far away from struggling, and when you're struggling, it's not far away from really good. So I definitely feel like some weeks, my game feels better than others, and there's a golf course that suits my eye better than others, and so those weeks you tend to think, this is a better week for me. But I don't know if I show up to any tournaments and go, oh, I'm for sure going to win this week. But I also don't show up to many weeks and think, oh, I'm not going to play well this week. I tend to come in with a similar mindset time after time.
It's quite an unusual start to the season to see 8 of the top 10 in the world without a win after playing more than a dozen events since, the start of the year. Jaime, you've covered this game for many years. Have you seen anything like that in prior seasons?
It's not that unusual because it's early and it's a pretty small sample size. And, Patrick himself, he's had 4 top 4s, 2 playoff losses. He's very close to having 2-win season, and he was Player of the Year last year. So I think you have to kind of take a long view, even though, there's so many of these guys that we expect a lot of who haven't really delivered so far this year. But there's been some good play. I think Jon Rahm has been around the lead. He hasn't won in a while since the U.S. Open. Bryson's injured. That was a kind of a shock that he seems a little lost right now in his whole approach, and obviously the injury exacerbating that. DJ has been flat for a while for some reason. I always just sort of feel like it can flip very quickly, and I think the best example of that is Jordan Spieth. We weren't talking about him as a threat to win tournaments, and suddenly one win and form is shown and potential is suddenly realized, and you realize how close good golf and mediocre golf, at least mediocre in terms of the finish, really is. So, it sounds cliche, but it is the nature of the game to some extent. I do think there's more depth, and you're seeing a Tom Hoge, a J.J. Spawn, those kind of guys pulling out victories. But it just shows when a pro is on, a guy who's good enough to qualify for the PGA Tour is on, he can win. And he can beat better players who aren't necessarily quite on. And that's what happens on occasion. I think as the golf courses get tougher, we enter the major season, you'll start to see the proverbial cream rise a little bit more. And so I don't think it's anything quite out of the ordinary. A little bit of an aberration. You're not seeing many victories. But I think all these guys are building towards something bigger.
You just touched on this a little bit. As we kind of get into these summer months, we may see sort of the cream rise to the top. Do you feel like this is a case where we see players like Cantlay or Morikawa or Rahm, kind of hit their stride? Or what are you expecting that we'll see from them as we get into these summer months?
Well, I expect tremendous concentration at the big tournaments, at the majors. I mean, they already had that, obviously, the players of the Masters. But these are the months that are going to make history. And so I think they're, in their minds, trying to pick the peak, if they can, for this run. And when you're that good, maybe not all of them peak, but let's say half of them do. I think you're going to see some of these names that we're talking about right now as not having won, win a major or 2.